All right. One of our favorite people that we're really missing seeing with everybody. Topher, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we really appreciate you are clearly one of the leaders who care. And so we couldn't do this without you being on it.
Mm.
The only thing we could do better is having Jorian, your wife, on it as well.
Indeed. Obviously, she's the better half here.
Yes, yes. You married up is what they say usually.
Uh-huh.
But how about if we start, if you'd be kind enough, just formally introduce yourself and a
Sure.
brief background of you, including, by the way, where the name Topher came from.
Sure. Well, let's start there. So my legal name on my passport, my driver's license is Christopher. The name Topher is the second half of Christopher. And when I was born, my grandmother, at the time she was alive then, her name was Christine, and we called her Granny Chris for short. So my parents got all clever and figured, oh, we can't have two Chris's in the family. We got to make sure that at least one of them goes by the second half of their name. So I suppose we could have called her Granny Steen, but instead I got the second half part. And I think everyone thought, Mark, that as I matured and became an adult, that I would revert somehow back to Chris or Christopher. But jokes on them. I'm still a proud Topher. Still a proud Topher.
I love it. It's unique. I love it. So tell everybody a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, let's see. So as we hinted at, my wife and I have been a dynamic duo in the professional realm and also the personal realm and the parental realm. And at this point, we're raising three boys, 13, 11, and 9-year-old, in partnership with one another. And we've also been running something called the Opportunity Collaboration for the last 10 years. And with Opportunity Collaboration, the historical anchoring activity was a global in-person event. Of course, that's not happening for the first time in 11 years since our founding in 2009. And yet, we are quite fortunate in that we've successfully built an incredible community, an incredible global network of leaders who are building sustainable solutions to poverty. So that's really the core demographic of the types of folks that we have historically convened at this in-person event. And it's a broad swath, Mark. It's folks like yourself. We're proud to include you in that network. And early stage social entrepreneurs and large nonprofit leaders and folks from the foundational world and the impact investment scene and folks from the corporate side and the media side and academia and authors and artists and musicians and lions and tigers and bears and all different types. And historically, our major effort has been to bring those folks together in such a way that it's not a standard conference format. It's much more about forging a space where people can really develop those heart-to-heart, meaningful, authentic relationships with each other. So ironically, we've really anchored the value proposition of this event on in-person gatherings. So of course, now we're up against the stark reality of this type of interaction. And how do we make sure that we're continuing to provide value to the folks who've been part of our major event over the last 10, 11 years.
I like your quote, which I was reminded of when I looked back on LinkedIn, that we set the table and the delegates create the meal.
That's it. Yeah.
Hey, you bring them. What's that other one? You bring them to the water, but you can't make them drink it. But I will tell you, I've been to a lot of conferences in my time, and the uniqueness and the energy and the ability to have. And I had a couple of really effective meetings in the pool when I was there last year. It kind of is related to what we talked about briefly before this call. There's an authenticity of you can do business, but it doesn't have to be so strict and structured and whatnot. There's an opening and collaboration, right?
That's right. Well, I think when I look back on it, Mark, I think the real diamond, so to speak, the real sort of clarion call of what we do and why we do it is trust-based relationships, is allowing folks to sort of get beyond their professional personas, beyond their egos, so to speak, beyond that mask that we often wear when we're trying to connect with the right people, and really talk about the meaningful work that we're all doing internally as opposed to externally.
Yeah, it really, it's well, you kind of answered my my second question. Yeah,
We
it's
lose you?
frozen a little bit here.
Oh,
There you
here we
go.
are.
Now
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
back.
back again. Yeah.
No, we're good. But I heard it all, and actually answered my second question. But I'm going to ask it anyway. Everybody has their why that we talk about, which I think is critical. But
Yeah.
why do you do what you do?
Yeah. Well, so I think why do I do what I do? I think there's a couple ways to answer that question, and perhaps the best way is a bit of an anecdote, a bit of a story, if you don't mind. So as I shared, my wife and I have been working together for a long time. So before this 10-year stretch of running Opportunity Collaboration, we were a husband and wife team managing all-inclusive resort outside of Telluride, Colorado for a little bit. We were also social entrepreneurs ourselves in creating a social club in Boulder, Colorado that convened a lot of folks in the impact and sustainability space and really focused on creating community. And throughout the early stages of our professional partnership, and this will speak to the accuracy of the better half comment, my wife was largely the one that people would turn to when it came to what business decisions should we make. She has a Stanford MBA. She worked for Bain and Company. She's got the sort of credentials that a lot of folks would see as the right credentials to turn to in terms of those decisions. Well, lo and behold, as we were getting involved in Opportunity Collaboration, this is 2010, our third son was due to arrive a few weeks before our event in October of 2010. And of course, my wife was not going to travel to Mexico and host a global event with a 2-week-old and a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old on her hip, so to speak. So I was thrust into that very precarious position of being, for the first time, sort of the one in charge between the two of us. And of course, I was anxious, I was nervous, I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off for the first few days of this 4-day event. And finally, about midway through, I had a chance to step into the pristine Pacific waters off the coast of Mexico, Pacific coast of Mexico. Take a deep breath, and I'm not sure how else to explain it, but there was this moment where I felt I was speaking to a higher power, shall we say. And the conversation was along the lines of, "Hey, Topher, this is it. Mm-hmm. This is your purpose. This is your why." And the why was bringing people together from across all these different silos and demographics and geographic borders, all of these people who really deeply cared about being in service to others and finding ways to connect them, finding ways for them to help support each other. And it was one of those pivotal moments, Mark. I mean, there's a classic quote of the 2 most important times of your life is when you were born and when you figure out why. And I think that was it. That was it. I called my dad a few minutes later. I was like, "Dad, this is the reason, and this is why you and Mom got together." So here we are 10 years later. I'm incredibly fortunate to still be in that position of cultivating the community and providing these types of connections and being that bridge builder for the world of impact.
Yeah, that's awesome. Most people, seek to find that thing,
Yeah.
and be able to find it and then help other people find theirs more, or maybe clarify it and advance it is fantastic. Kind of a good segue into, in a ways, we've both been involved in this whole how do we make a difference while we're working type of thing for years, and it's taken decades for corporate leaders to finally realize that aligning with social impact is actually good for business, not to mention attracting the best talent, because the best talent only now wants to go work with where leaders care about what's going on. So you've been involved in social entrepreneurship, from the spot to Colorado to this, and working with nonprofit and corporate ventures. How do you, this is a push question a little bit, you've kind of answered it, but I love answering these questions because it makes people think about themselves. So how do you briefly differentiate yourself as one of the leaders who care?
Wow. Well, I think in a lot of these other, so Opportunity Collaboration is one star in a much broader constellation of other impact events and impact networks and sort of platforms that exist to lift up the space, these field building entities. And one pretty stark difference that I see between myself and many of my peers, not to generalize, but many of my peers, is that for a lot of other folks, running these types of organizations is almost like a personal pedestal. It's almost like a way to further their own personal brands, as opposed to truly be in service of the impact that we're trying to achieve. And I can't tell you how much it makes my skin crawl to like be the one up on the stage with the microphone blabbing around. I would much prefer to be sort of a humble, quiet listener and nuanced connector, almost like the invisible mycelium beneath the surface, right? Doing that work. So one difference there, Mark, is just I'm never in it for the ego, and I say that in all humility.
Right.
I'm always in it because I truly want to be of service.
Yeah, no, right on, and you do, and that comes across, just to let you know again. And the one thing I've always found curious is how everybody talks about they want to collaborate, and I definitely want to collaborate. I'll lead though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let's collaborate if it furthers my agenda first.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Everybody's good. We're collaborating. Okay, I'm taking over right now. I remember my grandparents, talking about my grandparents a lot, and they used to say with a Kiev Russian type of accent, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And then they say education. And so this part's really interesting to me because we got technology speeding like no tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
We have COVID, which we thought was like the biggest thing. How are we going to handle this? Not to mention something small like racial injustice comes along,
right.
And we finally recognize, holy cow, this is a problem, like
right.
major. All this is going on, and people have a little more time to think right now. There's an awakening, if you will, almost to your point about, that which you find. And so how do you see the future with respect to our awareness at work or at home or at play, how we are and with each other?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, Mark. And I of course, I've been thinking a lot about the fact that it's no small coincidence that it's been the last 10 years that my wife and I have dedicated ourselves to building this organization. And these next 10 years are perhaps the most pivotal when it comes to, can we successfully achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, with the 2030 deadline? In other words, going through a bit of my own personal inquiry and, dare I say, existential crisis around, what value can I truly provide? Not only as, as an individual in this world, but also as a leader in this sector. And I think there's going to be there's an opportunity right now for a massive reset on almost a global scale, and at the deepest sort of DNA level of the systems that we've been operating in for the last few centuries. So I think the big wake-up call right now is to think about, first and foremost, and as hard as it is to grapple with this, how we may have been complicit in furthering and perpetuating these systems that have largely been responsible for driving inequality in the first place, for funneling wealth into the hands of a few, for prioritizing the infinite extraction of resources in a finite planet. What has been our role, whether we're conscious of it or not? What has been our role in furthering those systems? And then once we grapple with our own guilt, so to speak, how is it that we can transcend? What are the ways that we can actually start to reconfigure not only who we are internally as individuals, but then the organizations we operate in and the larger systems that we're all swimming amid as organizations and individuals? I think it's that duality of looking back and understanding our role, and then looking forward and seeing how we can literally almost like phase shift to another level of consciousness.
Yeah, it's a beautiful answer. Who was it? The chief of police in Minneapolis said way back when that was happening that silence is being complicit.
That's right. Yeah, silence is violence.
Yeah, and it's true. And the other part of it is, and a lot of people are smart enough to say it, that we do have to look back. We have to be sorry, but then both sides can't be hung up on you're not sorry enough or sorry is okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nothing gets done. You're busy arguing about if you're sorry enough, basically. Yeah. And action is required. But that's the part, if it's handled right, is exciting because we can take action and we can do stuff. Whether it's as simple as pharmacies unlocking the African American products because they think they're going to steal it, to how we listen or don't listen, to people. So, with that said, then we're focusing a lot on leaders who care, and we're looking at what role do you see business leaders who care, the current ones, the up and coming great ones, have to play with respect to their financial well-being, which is important, and their physical and mental well-being in general at work, and because it's no more. I never liked work-life balance anyways. You don't stop work to have life and then stop life to have work. Yeah. It's like one thing. So what role do you see business leaders playing in making sure that people are taken care of financially, physically, and mentally?
Well, so let me address that from a personal standpoint, because I think it's important to start there. I think, so for example, our business, this little mom and pop shop called Opportunity and Collaboration that my wife and I have been running for a decade now, is structured as an LLC. Okay, it's a limited liability corporation. Now, 10 years ago, it was really trendy and sexy to have a for-profit enterprise that was perpetuating impact, talking about solutions to poverty, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, in the last 6 months, during this period of quiet and perhaps awakening, I've come to terms with the fact that a for-profit model is largely inadvertently complicit yet again. Like we have in our own internal organizational DNA a structure that incentivizes profit, a structure that incentivizes a small group of owners to be the sole decision makers for the organization and the sole beneficiaries of whatever economic output we achieve through the success of the organization. Now, there are alternatives out there, and I think this gets to the answer of your question. So responsible business leaders, we owe it to ourselves to think about to what extent are we acting with integrity, not only outwardly in terms of what we do with our organizations, the principles that we live, that the organizations promote, the values that we market to the world, but how do we align internally as well? And I've been exploring all sorts of different alternatives there, Mark. Something that's particularly exciting for me right now is something called steward ownership, which is a model that's come out of Europe recently. It's the idea that you can take the best of a for-profit market-based approach and not let the worst aspects of sort of greed and extraction and hoarding economic and governance decision-making in that for-profit, and actually decolonize that in a way, democratize the economic and governance decision-making. So it's a bit of a hybrid approach. You can Google steward ownership and you can find all sorts of resources there, but it's those types of alternatives that I think we as responsible business owners and leaders really need to consider if we're actually gonna be in service of our own integrity and in service of impact.
Yeah, I love it. I hate saying it's like. It reminds me of startups. The worst thing startups hate is when the investor says, "Oh, you're just like." No, we're not just like. We're us. But in some ways, call it inclusive capitalism or something like that. Maybe there's a relationship there, but there definitely has to be some inclusiveness of everybody in the business, and the community, and it's part of a community. Really quick, I compare things to sports leagues where I never understood why the media would always say who won the trade in the league, because couldn't see how it was good if one team lost the trade if you're all in the same league.
That's right. Yeah.
And if one team keeps winning championships and the league sucks, then what value is the championship also? Mm-hmm. So I totally get, and I will look that up, what you're talking about. And what's best about it is you'll do better if you do that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. No, it's how do we make the transition from a shareholder economy to a stakeholder economy? That's really what it gets to.
Have you heard of ESOPs? You know what an ESOP is?
I have, yeah, I have. So one article that I read recently was, if you take the B Corporation certification and combine that with an ESOP model, you have this idea of steward ownership.
Not rocket science.
There are alternatives out there, and I think that's the point, Mark. It's like it's pretty safe to say that there is a body on the emergency room table right now, which is our neoliberal economic order, and there are people who are pumping on its chest, warming up those electric paddles to see how long can we keep this thing alive, how long can we keep that heart pumping. And then there are some of us who are saying, look, it's okay, we can let this thing go. There's a hospice for this body, and meanwhile there's a baby being born in the next room over. And it's the baby that's being born right now where that embodies these alternative models. I think we have an incredible opportunity to step into for the first time in perhaps close to 100 years. We have the massive opportunity to hold this new baby.
Yeah, and it's pretty exciting, and you can almost call it, inclusiveness or diversity or all of it. But yeah. It's, it takes less muscles to smile than to frown. And
yes, it does. It's so easy.
For some reason, we get to be the tendency of, if I can't, that it's easier to bring someone else down to your level than try to get up to the other one and stuff like that. So I love what you're saying. Let me ask you a question, a brief answer, and it's a ridiculous question, my favorite kind. But if you had the chance to do one thing, one dramatic change right now,
yeah,
what?
Whew.
Get a new interviewer.
Oh man. Well, look, Mark, I think where I provide the most value, as I shared before, is around connecting the right people at the right time to do the right work. So I do it all the time. I'm doing it today. I did it yesterday. I'm constantly facilitating these types of connections. And that will never stop. That will never stop. So every moment where I'm seeing the power of this individual and this individual having a conversation to perpetuate impact, to increase sustainability and create a more regenerative world, that's what I want to be doing.
Okay, so that would segue into, I would think, if I'm a graduate and I come to you and said, my graduation sucks, didn't have a graduation, can't even bring my girlfriend to the prom, and I come up to you, then I guess that would be the answer. If I ask you, what next? What now?
Yeah. Well, I would say, what are you passionate about? Mm-hmm. Where do you think you want to go? Who are the types of people you want to be talking to? What are the types of organizations you want to work for? What are your core values? Yeah. Where do you see being of most service in the world?
Yeah, great answer. Hey man, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Topher's bringing it.
You too, Mark.
It's great to see you.
You too, Ben.